Hello, guys. This is Debojyoti, and today we have a very special guest, and Caroline Binette. She's a bilingual actress of both Hollywood as well as French cinema. She has starred in Worldwide as Camzy, The Scarlet Vultures, Butchers, and many more. The Influencer. I think the first movie I watched of yours was The Night Before Christmas, and
Mhm.
many more. She has done short film, and she's like what we call in India. We have a term called pan-Indian actresses. Actresses who have done films in all Indian languages. She's a pan-American actress because she has done both both Hollywood as well as the Canadian films. So she's a pan-American actress. So Anne, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anne. So Anne, what I try to do in this podcast is I try to know the person behind the celebrity. Celebrity, the celebrity, the work we can all Google, we can look up their work, and that is something that is very visible. What I try to do is I try to know the person behind the celebrity or what that makes that person the artist they are. So I'll go straight to my first question. And you grew up in Canada, right? So
Yes.
how was your yeah? How was you always interested in acting? And is are Canadians really the nicest people on earth? Are the is the reputation justified?
um,
Because I have a 100% record with Canadians. Okay,
I
all
I
of
think
them I
we
meet.
we have some people super nice, but like anywhere, we have a lot of very crappy people here as well. I think it's just yeah. I can't say that we're all super nice. I've met a lot of dickheads, you know.
Okay, so it's like the Canada we don't see, like the dark side of
Yeah, the
Canada.
dark side of Canada, the ones that don't say sorry when they bump into you.
Okay, so the bottom line is the reputation of Canadian being the nicest is not really true.
No, no,
Although
no.
I have met like 100% of the nice Canadians. Anyway, go ahead. Um,
I think the nice Canadians are the ones that are gonna say yes, you know, and come are gonna be willing to talk to you and have conversations. The not nice American Canadians are the ones that are
yeah, it kind of
not gonna be interested
fulfills.
in. But a bit more. So living in Canada, I grew up with two military parents, which meant that I was bouncing around quite a bit. We would move every 2 to 3 years, and I think that also influenced why I became bilingual because when we would live in a French province like Quebec, my parents would send me to English school. And then when we were in an English province, my parents would send me to French school. So that was always important to them growing up, knowing both languages because my parents learned English at like 18, and my parents they talk with like a big French accent like this. They like think of their word and they don't have like all the proper pronunciation. So for my mom, it was important that we grew up kind of having both languages all the time. And so I can really thank her today for being able to work in both French and English.
Awesome. And you, as you mentioned, you grew up bilingual, and that's awesome.
Mhm.
So when we think about Canada, you grew up in Canada. We think about ice hockey. We think about professional wrestling. Obviously, the Canadian film industry may sometimes get overshadowed by Hollywood, but
Mhm.
it's still a very unique identity. The Canadian, especially the Canadian French cinema has a
Yeah.
unique identity. Yeah. So growing up, were you always interested in cinema? Always interested in
Mhm.
acting, or was there other interest?
I did my first play when I was 12 and I had a lot of fun doing it, but I didn't necessarily think that would be a career like most kids. I had like the typical I wanted to be a veterinarian or wanted to be like, you know, like the jobs that you see kind of all over, like police officer and firefighter. So like I even teacher, I think at one point I thought I might become a teacher, but it's only when I graduated high school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I took a year off and I visited a friend in LA and I did my first short film with him. And that just kind of like ignited the spark and the bug. Like people say it's an acting bug where you do it once and you kind of fall in love with it. And that's a bit really what happened. We filmed until 6 in the morning. We wrapped and then we sat on the roof of the kind of garage and just looked at the sunrise. And I was like, oh man, I want to do more of this. Like, I want to, it was just such a collaborative atmosphere. And so when I got back to Canada from that trip, I started doing short films and YouTube series and a bit more plays. But then as things progressed, I started doing less live action, like live plays. And I did a lot of murder mysteries, which you kind of get to do some crowd work. People come up to you, ask you some questions. Started doing less of those and more just concentrating on film, and voiceover is a lot of what I do as well. So yeah.
The interactive play that you mentioned is really interesting.
Mhm.
We'll get to that, and obviously your acting career. But I'd really like to know, because as I mentioned, I really like to know the person. So you mentioned that you had military parents, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
how did it shift? Because military family means you're moving a lot.
Mhm.
Obviously, the sense of duty, and again, it's not a normal job. It's not like your parents teach in school or do a business, right? So
Mhm.
how did it change your, like how did it like influence your worldview? Like maybe that's the best way to ask it.
So because that's what I grew up learning, I didn't know kind of anything different. I want to say for me it was very normal. Like they would give us a bit of a heads up, kind of like, hey, like in 8 months we're about to move. So it was like my last year with my friends, and I almost became a chameleon in all the different cities. Like, because I would show up, I'd be the new girl, and I'd kind of adapt to my environment, whether that be, you know, people in, like, let's say Yellowknife were way more, like, there's a lot more exterior activities. So I started liking those activities. And when I moved to different provinces, like depending on the group of friends that I was with, I would just kind of mold myself a little bit to who they were. And
Child,
it kind of came through with the acting, because acting is molding yourself into different characters to fit that role and what that person has experienced. So it's just acting, I say, is like an extension of what I've kind of done my whole life, of just adapting to my new surroundings. And you're always meeting new people. You're always, like, you'll work 10 to 20 days on a set and then on to the next project, right? And so you're constantly on new sets with new people. And it's more of the same of what I already knew, of just kind of, how are these people going to like me? Like and in a way, it's like, who am I? Because I'm always adapting. So, like, as I grew older, I was figuring out kind of what's the true and below all of that. But that came later.
so before becoming an on-screen actress, you are role playing in real life. You're playing different characters in different
Yeah.
cities. That
Yeah.
is really
Almost.
interesting perspective. So, and as you mentioned that you traveled different parts of Canada. What parts of Canada we are talking about? Because Canada, of the geography that I can, like,
Mhm.
from an outsider, 90% of it's like covered in ice, right?
Yeah.
Northern Canada is like basically North Pole.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
least
Yeah.
from
So,
basically, right? It's basically an extension of North Pole. So
yeah.
what parts of Canada are we talking about?
So I mostly did, like, when I was younger, I did the province of New Brunswick, which is really bilingual. And I think that also helped growing up, because I went to kindergarten and spoke English, but then spoke French at home. So I kind of grew up, my first word was French, my second word was English, third was French. Like, I kind of got both languages growing up at the same time. And then after that, I mostly did like Quebec's places in Quebec. So we would like live in Quebec for a few years, then we'd move to like Ottawa, which is like Ontario, which is the province right next to it. And then kind of back to somewhere else in Quebec City. And then, yeah, so I kind of did mostly that. But then when I was 10 to 12 years old, I lived in Yellowknife, which is North Pole all the way. Oh,
You like the term, right? You
yeah.
like the term.
So it's very small. Like, there was maybe 20,000 people in the city. And like, one thing that I is really different is that in winter the sun rises at 10 a.m. and goes down at like 3 p.m. So you don't get a lot of light during the winter, but it doesn't get dark. It gets kind of gray. So it's still light outside, but not sunny. And then in winter, I remember we had a rule at the school that the school would shut down only if it was minus 50 outside, which ridiculously
Okay.
cold. But if they
Yes,
did
minus
any,
50 is like an equation, because anything less than, so the part of India that I am from,
Mhm.
it's like very hot. India have like places like
Yeah.
Kashmir where there is no, anything less than 20 is like cold, where we'll be wearing jackets and so a concept like a minus,
Yeah.
we cannot
It,
even picture it.
no,
Cannot
no.
even picture it that how a minus 50 may look
I,
like.
most of, like, I want to say an average winter, like, we'll get 2 or 3 minus -30 kind of like weeks where it's like -20, -30, like around those temperatures. But then in Yellowknife, because it's often -30, if they say that the school closes at -30, we're never going to go to school. So it was only when it was -50, and there was like 2 weeks in the year that it'd be like -45, -49, school's still in. And it was so cold that your like lashes freeze up, and so it was like a frosty lashes. Your hair would like be all frozen. So yeah, it definitely North Pole, very cold. But because I was there at such a young age, it was kind of the perfect time for me to be there, because it was very like we would go snowmobiling and ice fishing, and it was a lot of exterior activities, which I really enjoyed at that time because I wasn't as cold as I am today. Like today, I have to put 17 layers, and I'm like, it's still cold. But
I feel
when I
cold
was young, I was tough, you know?
listening to you. I feel cold listening to you. -50, I feel cold listening.
Yeah.
So, and basically, your childhood was like the live action version of Ice Age, right? It was in North Pole. Yeah, that's amazing. So actually, I spoke with someone from Varkana, which is the northern Russia again, basically North Pole,
Yeah.
and they have to wear during like the especially harsh days. They have to wear glasses because the water that is inside your eyes get frozen.
Yeah. And I
Okay,
remember I was tough back then. I would go out in shorts after my like sports activity. I would go to soccer, and then my mom was like, "Put your coat on." I was like, "No, I'm warm." And yeah, now wouldn't dream of that. Big
okay, so from north, let's come down south. You have a pretty big country called USA. Did you start your career in USA or in the Canadian-based filming
So
ecosystem?
I've mostly filmed in Canada. I have a couple clients that I work with that do stuff in America, but they're like, we'll film, but it's still a Canadian production. So because of that, I can't really say that I've worked in Hollywood or America. So I wouldn't even consider myself a pan-American actress. I would mostly consider myself a bilingual Canadian actress, because I do get to work in
Okay.
French and in English, but mostly, yeah, just Canada.
Okay, great. So you started your career in Canada and you mentioned that you started with short film. But before that, the thing that you mentioned is really fascinating and I never heard something like that even happens is the interactive murder mystery play.
Yeah.
Please enlighten us on that because I never heard of a thing like that before.
So a lot of the time, the concept of it, we're like a usually smaller cast, so it's between like 5 to 6, 7 characters, and usually within the first act, someone dies very dramatically. Then the whole audience kind of comes to this person, and then the rest of the show is basically the actors dropping hints as to either why we would have killed that person, or what like everybody's motives were, what the different relationships between these characters are. And the audience gets to ask us questions. So let's say one of the characters I played was a teacher, but I was a drunk teacher because it was they're often period pieces. So this was during Prohibition. So alcohol was supposed to be banned, but I'm always drinking. People are like, "What are you drinking?" I'm like, "Apple juice." So like people get to ask you any question, and you kind of have to be on your toes, ready to answer them in character. The thing is, when you invite your friends and your family, they just want to see you break characters. So they purposely ask you questions that they know you have not prepared for, or like, so it makes it very funny, because if you break character, the audience is almost like, yes, I managed to do it. And then at the end, it's usually the reveal of like, oh, it was this person for this reason. And then the audience gets to vote. If they got the answer correct, well, then they like win. Oftentimes it was like tickets to another show or something like that. But yeah, those were a lot of fun in terms of just kind of mixing acting and improv. And there's like, you have to get from A to B, but everything in between is kind of depending how the audience reacts, like you kind of get to adapt to that. So yeah, those were lots of fun.
I mean, this is extraordinary. First of all, I did not knew something like that. So basically, you guys are doing a live action video game almost.
Yeah, that's a good way
Yeah, we
to
play the
describe
role
it.
playing like the detective
Yeah.
stories and stuff like that, right? Where we have to find clues and all that. You're doing it on a stage
Yeah.
in front of live crowd. I mean, this is amazing. I'm not sure why I wasn't aware of this. So, and obviously a lot of there has to be a lot of improv, right? You cannot script things like that. Maybe you probably have a basic outline,
Yeah.
but like 80 to 90% has to be an improv. So yeah, I mean this is amazing, man.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why doesn't people talk about it? This
It
is
was
amazing.
definitely so I there's a lot of fun in those, but you still do a lot of rehearsing because and that's the part that makes it a bit harder to do now because of how all my other like acting is very last minute. So a lot of the jobs that I'll have, I'll only get confirmation maybe like a week. If I'm lucky, I'll get a 2-week notice of like, okay, in 2 weeks you're filming 2 days in Toronto. But most of the time I'll get kind of like a, "Hey, are you free in 2 days?" And so, yeah, sure, I am, right? Like, but because of the last minuteness of everything else acting wise, it's really hard for me to commit to those plays and live action because you need a lot of rehearsing and you can't start missing all your practices because you're a team. And if you leave, then the team can't practice with you. And so I always say that theater is going to be my retirement acting because then I'll have the time, I'll be able to like commit to the rehearsals. But unfortunately, yeah, like I haven't done a lot of live theater in a really long time, and every time I go to see a play, I just like it just drives. Yeah, I just yeah, they're just so much fun.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting that what you guys do because you are basically, I was thinking as you were answering, you're basically like combining three different facets of performance. One is that video game, live action video game nature. Second is obviously a theater, and third is the improv.
Hmm.
So you guys are kind of combining all three. I mean, this is amazing. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not sure why it's not mainstream. I can understand, but it should like people should talk about it,
yeah,
right? Yeah, I mean, this is amazing and kind of like we like it deserves like a full episode on its own. But I'll resist myself and I'll ask one last question on this topic. So, is there any fun moment because like the way that you describe, it's completely wild card, right?
yeah.
Anything happens. So, like, are there any fun moments? I can
Um,
understand how stressful it might be for you because you have to do all this,
yeah.
but it's totally wild card, right? So please go.
One of my fun moments was when my family and friends came to see me because, again, they were trying to make me break character. Because they were my friends and family, I could kind of be. So my character got more and more drunk as it progressed in the story. And so by the end of it, I was kind of insulting my friends and my family in character because I could. And I remember at one point they're like, because there's also a dinner component to it. So while they're eating, we kind of go around the tables and we like kind of like, can you believe that he did that? Oh my goodness. I heard rumors that this happened. So like we're trying to drop hints. And while they were eating, my family was like drilling me with questions. And I was like, oh, you asked too many questions. And I would like grab some of their drinks and I just got to drink their wine because why not? So yeah, those are always kind of when people and you can get away with a bit more, it's definitely yeah, a lot of fun.
And the commitment to the beat, and you need the commitment to the beat in doing something like that. So that is really nice to know that something like this exists, and it's
Mhm.
like it's totally wild card energy, right?
Yeah.
And so now let's talk about your film career. You mentioned that you obviously love theater, as you mentioned it's your retirement gig, right? So
Yeah.
you started in short film. So is it something that you always, because acting, I have spoken with other actresses and actors as well, so acting in stage and acting in front of camera, be it a short film or a feature film, it's two different types of
Yes.
performance.
Yeah.
So how did you make the switch? You obviously love theater, you have already mentioned. So how did the switch came from theater to
Um
short film?
I think it's just the market in Ottawa that kind of led me to do more TV, but also it's because there was more like that's where I got paid, right? Like there was not a lot of money in live and theater because there's a couple shows a year that'll pay you. And so I kind of naturally had to do a bit more of that transition just to be able to say that like if I want to work as an actor, you need money to pay bills. So I kind of transitioned, not necessarily only for that reason, but it was just there was a lot more on camera opportunities as well, right? Because there was only maybe like 6 to 7 shows that were theater based in Ottawa, but then there's commercials and there's short films and there was feature films and indie, like there was just way more projects that were happening also on camera. So that kind of, I tried a couple and I really did fall in love also with the on camera acting. It's less stressful in a sense that if you mess up, okay, we're just going to retake it. It's still plenty stressful because the days are crazy and you can't go messing up 10 times in a row because then people start, like we're on a schedule, we need to move this along, but there's less pressure, I want to say. Also more leeway to improvise, like especially with comedy stuff, like there's more room to try stuff, and if it doesn't work, well then it doesn't work, but we have the other take that did, right? Whereas when you're trying to improvise comedy live, if it doesn't work, then it just kind of like falls flat and everybody's like meh. But then on camera you can try stuff. If it doesn't work, they'll use the better take, they'll edit around it. So I think that aspect made for way more collaboration with the actors on set, because we were way more willing to try things. And what if we do this, and then you build off each other's ideas and you get a bit more time to work those ideas out. And I think that is really fun of the on camera acting.
So, what do you prefer? The stage acting, it's not, there is no the double take. You have to, like, anything goes. You have to memorize everything, or the freedom that comes with, like, the on-screen acting, because it's recorded. You can have retakes. You can, like, if you take any decisions regarding improv, and if it doesn't work, there is obviously you can fight for another day. You are living to fight another day. So, what like obviously theater is challenging. I have spoken with many, and theater is far more challenging. So what excites you more, in like going in front of a stage audience or going in front of a camera? I think that's probably the best.
It's like two things that I really love. So it's hard for me to say like, oh, this one or that one, because the thing that's really exciting with on camera is like, because it's 10, 20 days, you get to do so many different kinds of characters too, right? Like I get to play such a way wider range of characters in a year doing film and TV. But then when you're doing plays, you work with the same group of people for so long, you get so close to your cast. And that camaraderie is why I'm like, I know it's going to be my retirement acting, because I get to be with my friends and doing the plays and you get to really dive into that character. By the end of the show, that character is like a little part of you forever. I got to play, Mrs. B for 4 to 6 months. And so, yeah, it's really hard for me. Obviously right now I'm doing a lot more on camera things. So I'll say for now on camera, but it's pretty tied. Both of them just bring me such a different, like there's no stress like the live performance stress, but it's not even stress, it's excitement. Like the butterflies that are just like, and the crowd's always different. You feed off the energy that they bring to you. And so like some performances, just the crowd, it's just like fire that's in the air, and it just feels, it's a different kind of excitement. And
So we have talked about the interactive plays that you did, as well as the stage performances. Now let's get into your short film. I think probably 2017, 2018 becomes your breakout, when it's The Night Before Christmas comes out, and I think The Secret Vultures also came out around the same time.
Yep.
So before that, like, how did your on-screen journey begin? You mentioned the short film. So in our country, I'm not sure if you're aware of this. So if we make a short film, what we do is we have like film festivals and stuff, and we show it there. The short film ecosystem is very exhibition based. Okay, it's very the entire ecosystem is exhibition based, and it's dependent on the film festival. So is it same in Canada as well? Because Canadian films are something that obviously I know, because I'm mad about cinema, right? But anyway, so for general audience, let's talk about the Canadian film ecosystem a little bit.
I want to say very similar. I started getting into film. There's on Facebook groups, like the Ottawa filmmakers, Ottawa actors. There was just a bunch of different groups that I started joining, and then there'd be
Sorry to interrupt you, and just to give a context, what year are we talking about? Like, what time frame are you talking about?
What kind of films?
What era are we talking about? What year are you talking?
So this was, I want to say 2017, 2017, 2018.
So it was well before COVID.
Yeah. I want to say those groups are still very much like they're still active, but it's less, it's because the community is already built. Like there was a strong Ottawa filmmaking community. And so because that community already existed, it just found itself on Facebook. But I think it's hard to start a community on Facebook now. So if there's already groups that exist, join those. And usually they're pretty, like I know in Ottawa they organize kind of monthly festivals that are just like local events, and it's just a good reason to meet people, go and work with people that are in the community. You get to see what other people are making and just challenge yourselves, because every month is like a different theme, a different challenge. And so we're pushing people of our community to get better, and you grow as a community. The more you work with better people, the more you tend to level up, and then you are leveled up. So when you work with someone else, you can bring them higher. And so I think those, like that's where I started, was those communities, and it was just kind of like the stepping stone of, yeah, started from there. And then you have something to show for, you can get an agent. Like it was just, you can't think that you're going to be in a Hollywood production right away, right? Like you kind of I most of the things I started doing, I watch today, and it is hard to watch because I feel like I've gone so much better. But that's also how I learned. I would have never been ready for my first feature film, Butchers, if I hadn't done web series that today I'm like, oh, that was way too big or overacting. Or sometimes it's also like when I get nervous naturally, I tend to bite my lips. But then on camera, that looks really bad. And so I saw it once and I was like, I can't do that anymore. That looks not good. Or it doesn't portray the emotion that I think I'm nervous naturally, so that's what I do naturally, but it's on camera, it doesn't portray nervousness. So then I like watching myself is the only way that I was able to learn and get better and then be ready for the bigger roles that I was now auditioning for. So I think that's a bit of like the journey of starting on Facebook, small little shorts that led to getting my first demo reel, that led to meeting. So yeah.
So I just love the how you described. So things like you got an opportunity and the things kept falling into places, right?
Yeah.
So what was like Butchers? I think was your first feature film, at least of the first like a first feature film that I think what I should say like a first proper film. I think you have probably done shorts and stuff before the first feature film was Butchers. And personally, I want to tell you a story about Night Before Christmas. As I mentioned, it has a bit of a cult following in West Bengal. I'll get to that. But let's like, how did you land on like Butchers? Because Butchers is like it's a well-known film. It's a fairly a well-known film. You have obviously done shorts on YouTube. I actually mentioned you once, right? Yeah. So anyway, so let's talk about like your journey in the films now, the feature films. So Butchers, like was Butchers an independent cinema or was it
Yep.
backed by a studio? Because I'm not sure how Canadian ecosystem works. Is there a
Yeah.
studio?
So
Okay.
that, which was still very much independent, the casting for that came on one of the Facebook groups. So like I had been doing those short films, saw horror feature film, which is applied for it. And then one thing that I did do is when they were doing the casting process, I offered to read during the audition. So I got to be in the room, read for all the other characters while other actors were auditioning. So it gave me a really big idea of the casting process. Like I wasn't necessarily it's a good, like for me it was a good opportunity to spend a full day with the people that were casting the movie, but also just to get an idea of how quickly sometimes the casting decisions are made. Like sometimes it's, oh, we really like that guy, but she's too tall for that character. So, it's not necessarily sometimes about your skills, and sometimes it's a look, sometimes they actually want a blonde girl. And yes, you can dye your hair, but that girl's already blonde. So we don't have to, and especially on the indie and the independent worlds, like there's not budget to pay 2 grand to get you blonde over the course of a month, right? So if you're already blonde, that's one less problem to solve, one less thing to figure out. And so sometimes it really is as simple as like how you looked in comparison to other people. Yes, there's like a baseline talent, but being in the room, I saw 4 people that were really good for a role. The reason they chose one over the other sometimes is, and sometimes they'll not necessarily choose the best person, but the person that fits more the ensemble rather than the person that was like best for that particular character. And so it gave me almost like a sense of relief when it came to auditioning, because I know a lot of people are like, I'm being rejected, I'm being, like you're auditioning and then you don't hear back. But being in the behind the scenes of it and seeing how it happens really made it way easier. I got to enjoy my auditions now. And so yeah, that was kind of my first feature that I got to
Butchers, yeah.
be a part of. But the fact that I helped out with the casting, I think really helped me just be more okay with the whole process of the casting when it comes to films and just acting in general.
And you mentioned a really good point, and that is like the challenges of independent cinema. Now in India, because of the larger population and so many industries, it's a little different. Now Canada as a country, the per capita income is among the highest in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how difficult it is to make independent cinema in Canada. I spoke to another actress. She's from Cuba, and they took 10 years of making an independent cinema. You can
Oh,
literally
wow.
make.
That's like a commitment from everybody on board. Holy cool.
Yeah, and they had to like wear same dress for 10 years. The
Yeah.
person I talked to, the actress, they had to maintain the same, like the same body type, same
Yeah.
hair, everything for 10 years.
That's crazy.
And
Yeah.
obviously now I'm not going into like the Cuban policies and the government
Yeah.
restrictions. That let's not go into that. So like how difficult it is to make a film like Butcher in no, not just Butcher, an independent cinema in the Canadian film ecosystem, and what challenges you guys face?
So I want to say films, if you start stretching it out over more even than like a couple months, that becomes really complicated because it's always a question of budget, right? Like they're made with smaller budgets, but then you're paying, like you try to pay people, but when you're paying people 150 or $200 a day, which isn't necessarily enough to cover their main expenses, anything else starts becoming a priority for everybody involved, right? So then if you we usually like I find that the movies that have worked the most is when we go, this is the shooting date, we have these 12 days and they're insane, like 12 to 15-hour days, but then it's filmed and it's done. Because at the second you start going, okay, well, who's free when? And you have to fit 20 people's schedules between the actors and the camera and the sound and the grip, and it just becomes an absolute puzzle nightmare to like start figuring out. So it's like, okay, who's available these dates? That's when we're filming it. And you kind of get like, you commit really intensely for those kind of that 3-week period. And then the post production takes a little while. Like a lot of the films that I've done will film really quickly in like a 1-month period, but then the post production of it is the thing that's going to be more, not necessarily dragged along, but then like 2 years, I want to say, is like not rare in terms of like the day you finish shooting, and then 2 years later is about when the movie kind of comes out. But that's also because if you start running out of money, it's easier to split up that process. Okay, well, now we're paying the color correction, and then the color correction gets done, and then now we'll do the sounds, but we don't have the money yet for sound. So people work jobs, accumulate money, and then pay. So like sometimes that's also the reason why it takes longer. And then sometimes it's just people have other gigs, have other jobs. So
Do
you're
you guys
working
have
with,
like crowdfunding? Sorry to interject. Do you
yeah,
guys have crowdfunding?
a little bit, but from my experience, I don't have a lot of, not necessarily positive experience, but not a lot of the movies that have tried crowdfunding even came close to reaching their budget. Like most of the movies, I think I have one film that and it was like a like mid-length, so I want to say it was 25 minutes that got its funding, but it was based on the book of a famous YouTuber. So he like shared it with his community, and it got funded, I think, because his community really likes him, really wanted to see the book come to life. But other than that, all my other crowdfunding, all the other movies that I've been part of that were crowdfunded never got, like they maybe got 10 grand, but they were looking for like 30 to 40. So at 10 grand, we're paying our locations, we're paying the food, and everybody else is working volunteer. So like that's when I get approached by people that tell me that they're doing a crowdfunding project. I just assume I'm not going to get paid, because that's my experience so far. I think I've been part of 3 crowdfunding projects, and one of them was the YouTuber one, but the other 2, like, not even close to what they were looking to. So yeah, I wouldn't think crowdfunding, unless you really, like, you have already big follower base that's following you and that's like wanting to support you. I wouldn't recommend I just wouldn't recommend crowdsourcing a movie. Like, it's good to get extra funds, but I wouldn't do it as a main source to hope to make a movie. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're doing crowdfunding, basically you do it for passion and forget
Yeah.
about the paycheck.
And I think that's
Okay,
also, in general, you should do it for passion to begin with, because it's
absolutely.
not a lucrative, like, making a movie is a risky investment, right? Like, you're not guaranteed to make that money back. You're not, even in the post production, in the end, getting it distributed, you're not guaranteed to make that 30, 40, sometimes 100K back on a feature film. So do it because you want to make that project, because it's something you're going to be proud of. Obviously, if you do it well and you work with people that are professional, then you're more likely to get your money back. But it's not the easiest business out there. So, like, if you do it for passion first, then at least you're doing it for the right reason. And if the money comes, awesome. But if it doesn't, it's not soul crushing that, like, I've lost everything. My whole savings were put in this movie. Well, you have to accept that, like, you're making it because you want to make it and not because you're looking to make money. That's kind of, and in any, like, at any level, I think also you kind of have to go in with that attitude. I think movies have become such a money making, like, people are making movies to try to make money, and that's where your creative decisions aren't lining up with the story, because you're, like, trying to appeal to the broader audience to try to get more eyes on it, rather than telling an interesting story that might not be as wide range. So yeah.
Understood. And now, ecosystem, let's talk about your performances. So, Butchers was your first feature film, and I think The Night Before Christmas was your first big breakout, right? The story that I needed to.
I want to say that one came, like, shortly after, but I had a, like, 2018 to 21, I filmed a lot of things, and then they kind of all came out at the same time. So I think because they came out at similar moments, it was almost like a momentum thing of, like, it
Okay.
seems like I was super busy in 21, but really it's because I had been busy 2018, 2019, and then, well, COVID kind of obviously
So it
put
was like a
everything down.
cumulative thing. It was
Yeah,
like a
so I think it looked like 21, 22 was, like, my breakout year, but it was just because all of my stuff came out then, but it was stuff that we filmed for the past 3 years. So, like, it's a bit of that weird, like, yeah, sure. But for me, it was already such an old movie, like, I filmed Butchers in 2018 and it came out in 20. So by the time Butchers came out and there was, like, the kind of excitement of how big Butchers got, for us, we were already 4
yeah,
films
3 years, and one of
in,
those three
right?
years happens to be the 20, the
Mhm.
greatest year ever, the
Yeah.
COVID year, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
to be very honest, 2018 and 21 is like 20 years apart.
Mhm.
Even for me as well, like 20,
Yeah.
like anything before 20 feels like a
A
millennia
blur.
ago, like a complete blur, right? So actually, speaking of the COVID, I actually watched your the night before Christmas during the second wave of COVID. Again, we had
Mhm.
like 3 separate stages of lockdown, and one of my friends like shared we have like a major film group in West Bengal. It has like close to over 100,000, I guess, maybe even more
Okay.
than that. Yeah, so it was shared there, and I watched that. And yeah, for me, it was like the first time getting introduced with a person named Carolyne Binette. And you had a very short role, but a very memorable role. Now let me talk about the night before Christmas. And obviously, that was a very bold role as well. I don't think of the movies I have watched of you haven't done anything else that involves nudity. You had a very glamorous, a very provocative role in View Influencer, but I don't think it involves nudity. Night before Christmas, yeah, yes. So of all the stuff I have watched, and I have watched quite a bit of you. So yeah, please tell me about the experience night before Christmas.
Collaborative environment. Like, a indie film is a lot of troubleshooting. Like, there's constantly problems arising, and it was very much like people are willing to listen to a suggestion you might be able to bring. So like, and I think that because I worked with these guys for a couple films after that, so it was kind of like my first film with them, and then we did 6, 7 films together, and yeah, it was just kind of it was a hectic shoot. It was like crazy days. The house scene was an Airbnb that we were technically not supposed to shoot in, and then the owner kind of saw all the cameras coming in and was like, "You're shooting here?" And we're like, "No, we're just staying here because we're shooting tomorrow." So we had to like, and he stayed for
I
like,
think if the owner saw you dancing, I think he would not have complained. I'm very
oh,
sure about
no, but because like part of the rules was you're not supposed to film. And so he stayed for like 2.5 hours. So we had to kind of like, oh, yeah, we're just eating. So we had to kind of like shift the whole day. We ended up finishing, I want to say like 6 o'clock in the morning, went to bed. And then the next day at like 2 in the afternoon, we were shooting again. So it was like, again, most of that film is just kind of a big, hectic party of a blur because it was so much fun, but it was also so hectic that like you just kind of get it done. But that film also got stretched too long. Like they had to rewrite some scenes because some actors were no longer available. They had to, because we were filming like a week and then like 3 weeks off and then a week on, and trying to align schedules. Like that was after that movie is when they really started going, okay, well, we're filming in 3 weeks and it's done. Like we're just, everything is getting filmed in these 3 weeks. Take the time off. Let's make it happen, because that stretched for like 4 months. And yeah, that was just a very complicated shoot to get
as
everybody.
what other movies as well. So my first thought was maybe because of an independent production, maybe your role got cut because in that
No.
movie you're basically playing an eye candy, right? And
Mhm.
you have never performed an eye candy role. You have always played substantial roles. So that's like that kind of struck out. Like for
But
me as
see,
well.
that's the
That
thing, is that that came out before a lot of my other roles, but it was filmed before a lot of my other roles. So that was like my second feature. I did Butchers and then I think I did that. So it was like it was super early, but because it came
man, for
out,
a second film that was really
but I also don't necessarily, like for me, nudity is like everybody has a butt. Everybody has, like half the
yeah, but
population has boobs.
the thing is, when you talk about nudity, when you talk about like independent cinema nudity,
Mhm.
in like the feature length film, there is a lot of mollycoddling, there is a lot of safety measurements, and that it should be. So, like in independent scenarios, I'm not sure if you have that support system. You probably do. So,
Mhm.
like how difficult it is now. Of nudity is apart. We all know like we have
Yeah.
genitals, right? No big, not a big surprise. So, like how was it challenging? Maybe not the nudity part, but maybe maybe the perception part.
I mean, I can't say that I was super I so this is how I approach the scene, because if you make it awkward, then it's awkward, right? Like if you're kind of
Absolutely, yes.
if you're like, "Oh, don't can we have like it's just it's awkward." If you make it awkward, everybody's like, "Oh crap, I looked. I shouldn't have." Like it just makes the whole atmosphere just tense. And so my approach was like, "Okay, this is we're about to do the scene." I came out, I had my bathrobe. I was like, "Okay, yeah, we're good. They're there. Let's get it. Like let's get going." So because I approached it that way, I think it was just kind of like everybody was just like, okay. And it was such a small cast and crew. There was maybe like 10 of us. It's like you can't, who are you going to ask to go out of the room? The only person that
Yeah,
wasn't
absolutely.
needed in the room was the only other woman that was really like on set, which was the makeup artist. I was like, she can watch too, like like
Yeah,
literally.
it's
So
not
like,
big of surprise to her.
yeah. So I think if you approach it that way, I know I haven't done a lot of it afterwards, because it is also that thing that unfortunately, once you start being branded as someone who's done nudity, a lot of people won't hire
Yeah, there is
you.
a bit of a stigma to it. Yeah,
So I have been more careful about that. Like, because this, again, this was like my second feature film. So I was like, and I still today, like, have kind of like don't care about nudity. But I came to realize that I do have to be careful, because if that's the only thing that starts popping up when people Google my name, I might lose potentially other work because
yeah.
of it.
That
So I
is the
kind of
why
had
I
to be
brought up
more
because
careful
in
with
Night
that.
Before Christmas, you are basically your character was treated as an eye candy and
Yeah.
something you have never done, right? You
Yeah.
always had substantial roles. Even in glamorous roles, there was a substance. But
Yeah.
anyway, if there is any aspiring actresses talking, if there is nudity, just play it cool, as I am saying. Just
Yeah.
play it cool. And so you mentioned that these movies came out like one after the another in
Yeah.
2022, 2021, and it kind of built. So what are the projects we can look forward seeing you in the next 1 to 2 years?
Um, so I think a lot of my projects have now been released. Like I'm trying to think which project that. Oh, actually, I have one that should be coming at the end of the year. But my last two projects that came out that were filmed like 2 years ago were Blood and Snow. So that one
Yeah, I watched that. Yeah.
really fun role for me. I got to play the villain for once. I got to do the killing. That was very fun.
Yeah,
Um,
you got killed in so many different ways.
oh,
Yeah, I'm happy that you get the like
yeah,
you deserved it. You
yeah.
earned it.
But yeah, I think I counted. I was at 12 or 13 deaths since the beginning of my career, like 5 years ago. So
You have
yeah,
earned some. You have
yeah.
earned some killing, no doubt about.
And Blood and Snow was very full circle for me because a lot of the ways that I've been killed in the past is how I got to kill people in this movie. And so it was very kind of full circle. I died this way, now I get to kill someone this way. So it was very, yeah, I love to play villains.
Okay.
If I can play a villain again, I would love that.
So I have seen the movies that I have watched. You're very comfortable in two different genres, and you're really good at it. One is comedy, and other is horror, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
apart from, so are you even as a person when you're not performing? Are these two genres that you enjoy the most, or is there any other genres, or is
So
comedy and horror things that you
I
perform but not necessarily enjoy?
so I do enjoy comedy. I think when I get to sit down and like watch something, I am in the mindset of just wanting to like clock out and just relax. So I tend to watch more comedy, but I don't like horror, which is hilarious because that's a lot of what I did. A lot of what I do is horror movies because that's what's being filmed here. But horror movies just get to me. I'm very afraid of horror movies. And so
My God.
I don't watch them. And so working in horror movie though has given me such an appreciation and now I can watch horror movies because I'm always a bit distracted with I wonder how they did this gag. Oh, you know what? The music, the
You're
suspense that
not
they're
terrified
building.
of the ghost. You're not terrified
Yeah.
of the ghost, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it kind of gave me because when I used to watch horror movies, I would like do my nails or I would always do something to distract me because when it got too scary, I'd be like, like I
Okay,
don't
like
really
let's
want to,
so what are the horror movies that like really creeped you out as a child?
And I haven't watched that movie, but one of them that got me from when I think I watched it when I was too young was Saw. I think it was the third one.
Saw counts more as a slasher movie, right? It's
It,
more of a like a
so
torture porn kind of a thing.
yeah, so that and so I
It was
remember
a R-rated movie. You are doing something illegal,
yeah,
and
no, I don't know how I got to watching that movie, but that movie like messed me up. Like cuz I remember it was the third one and one of the scenes like she's kind of tied at the bottom and they're grinding pigs, so she's like choking in chunky pig juice and
oh
that like
my God,
that traumatized. I didn't eat pork for like 6 months after that movie. I was like, I couldn't. It was so gross. So I didn't watch that movie messed me up. And then another one that I watched is all the paranormal activity stuff. Cause that the second I would it's not after watch I would watch the movie and I'd be fine like the evening of, the week of, but it's like 3, 4 months down the line, I would have very vivid dreams. And
oh my
that's
God.
where the horror movies haunt me is way later. It's like way later, and I'll
So
have a
it's like a
dream
slow burn in real life, right?
like
It's a slow burn in real
yeah,
life.
yeah. So I like the paranormal activity ones like freaked me out 4 months later. So I was like, I have got to stop watching horror movies. This is not for me. So yeah, so I haven't watched a lot, but I work in them all the time. And now that I have, I appreciate a really good horror movie. Like the talent that it takes to build the suspense and then subvert it because you expect something, but then it's something else. That's when it's successfully done.
It's an art in itself, yeah.
Yeah. And so a lot of appreciation for the genre, but yeah, still scared shitless when I watch horror movies. So yeah.
So, Anne, you're a very creative person, and you have obviously done a lot of work in front of camera. But because of your like background in theater, and I have talked with a lot of theater professionals, I have seen that because they have like a very constructive idea of acting and storytelling, they are often very interested in going behind the scenes and
Hmm.
becoming a director because of the very constructive way they look at the art, right?
Yeah.
So, do you have aspiration to be a director? Can we see and Carolyne Binette behind the camera in the director's chair?
I don't think behind the camera because I don't trust, like, I know not much about camera, but I would definitely love to. So I'm writing. I have a lot of ideas. I'm trying to write ideas that for characters that I'd love to play. So that's more where my behind the scenes come, but I would for sure trust someone else with my script because I don't think like I can write it, but I don't necessarily think I have the directorial vision to direct other people. So I would hire someone for camera, hire someone as a director to like that kind of understands the vision, but that can give direction. Because especially if I'm going to be acting in it, I don't directing and acting. Like, how am I going to direct myself? Right. Like, I think I need that outside perspective. So, not necessarily as a director, but like maybe a little writer credit somewhere. But again, I'm very much comfortable with the idea of someone taking my script and bringing it to another level. Like, I'm not married to my ideas. If someone brings in a better, like a change that makes it better, yes. So, like, I know people are better at writing, at filming, at so I trust that working with other people will bring my idea just like a notch further. So yeah, that's kind of my extent of the behind the scenes is kind of there.
So your outlook is more like a collaborative, creative force, right?
Yeah.
Rather than being an outright director. And so since I am from India,
I have a hard time. What do you want to watch? I don't mind. People put something on and then I'll like be into it. But if I have to make a decision, I am that person that's going to be like, I have a hard time making the decision. And so I've seen a couple things, but it's mostly been kind of like the like Bollywood, I want to say things. So like either really big dance numbers and the stunt
yeah.
art too. I think but there's such an art to that too because it's such good storytelling. It's not realistic, but it's such good storytelling. And I think
It's
that's the thing
basically
about
so Indian cinema that you mentioned that it's basically a form of wish fulfillment. Yeah, and that's why it's not hyper realistic.
yeah.
Yeah,
And but I think it's so entertaining. And I think also that's the thing is like with horror movies, it's the same thing. A horror movie doesn't necessarily need to be not
hyper
that
realistic. Yeah,
but hyper realistic or like and I don't want to say good because that's like it still needs to be good, but a bad horror movie can still be so entertaining. And I think that's the thing, the reason why horror as a genre is doing so well is because even the bad horror movies are fun and they're
yeah. I
some
mean,
people die and like
the Nicolas Cage's Wicker Man
yeah,
is one of the most entertaining films ever.
yeah.
So, Anna, we are like towards the end of the interview. I'd
Mhm.
really like to know again, since we like to know as a person. So, apart from acting, what are the hobbies that you share? You obviously mentioned you write, and so what are the hobbies that you share?
So I kickbox. So that's
My God.
yeah, not good at it. I would not put myself in a fighting situation at all, but I just like the training part of it. I really enjoy. I also enjoy like I just got a kitty, so right now a lot of my time is spent just picking up all her messes and playing with her. And
So
I'm
you're a
trying to
cat person.
yeah, definitely a cat person. I'm a crazy cat lady, but I'm definitely trying to train her. I'm trying to teach her tricks, and I'm making her a movie star. And then a lot of like just artistic things. Like I like painting. I like not necessarily canvases, but like bird houses and kind of paper mache and like just a lot of artsy stuff like macrame and yeah, just that and then video games. I play a lot of video games and I'm making a video game. So that's taking a lot of my
So
time lately.
where do you die more often, in screen or in video games?
Video games. I'm the healer of the group and yeah, that's I can't aim. My aim is atrocious. So yeah, I die way more in video games.
So Anna, so you are the kind of person after talking to you for over an hour, you'd be like the crazy cat lady when you'd be old and you'd be, as
No.
you mentioned, that theater is going to be your dig and you will absolutely love it. I'm not sure about the kickboxing, I'm not sure, but again, fingers crossed on that. And thank you so much for doing this with me. As I mentioned to you, Canadians have a nice reputation for being the nicest people on
Nice
earth.
people.
And although as you mentioned, there is like a quote unquote darker side of Canada as well, but you were super nice. It was a blast talking to you. And do you want to say anything to conclude?
I guess thank you. If people have questions and whatnot, I'm always willing to like share. I've only been in this industry for like 5 years, so like I still consider myself super new. And hearing you say celebrity to me is like very weird because I'm
No, as I
not a
mentioned, that
celebrity.
couple of
Like
your films have a following in West Bengal, especially in my part of
yeah, we
India.
just
Yeah, and we have like the celebrity culture in India. A movie actor is completely different.
yeah.
You do not know what kind of like culture that we have in India. It's like worship culture. So yeah,
Yeah, to me that's like
you're a major celebrity by Indian standards. There's no
well,
doubt about that.
yay! It was just very, yeah, surreal a bit for me to consider myself that because I'm just having a blast making films, and it's such a fun industry that for me it's like hard to understand that people see me in that capacity when to me I'm like, I'm just a normal person. But,
No, yeah, you have done. You're living your life working in multiple languages as an actress. You love
mhm.
theater. You die in video games. Obviously, doing kickboxing. So yeah, you're living your life. All the best for everything that you do. Personally, for me, I have always enjoyed you watching on cinema. I'll like keep enjoying.
Mhm.
Maybe if there is like something else comes up, we can always have you back again. It was
Yeah,
a
thank you
blast
so
of
much.
yeah, it was a blast talking to you. And thank you so much, Anne, for agreeing to do this. And all the very best for your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Take care, Anne. Bye.